We are pleased to present this next session with a top Latino executive at Google. Please welcome Jesus Mantas, Senior Managing Partner, IBM, for an intimate conversation with Chano Fernandez, Co-CEO, Workday.
Hello, buenas tardes, good afternoon. Thank you, everybody, for choosing to spend the next 15 minutes with Chano and I. We're both super excited to have this dialogue, and hopefully you'll be engaged. So I'll start by saying, please use your chat. As we go through the dialogue, feel free to submit questions. They will pass them to us, and then we can try to address them real time. With me here, I have Chano Fernandez, a compatriot Spaniard, and a remarkable leadership story through a journey that landed him on August 2020 as co-CEO of Workday. So welcome, Chano, and looking forward to have this discussion with you.
Thank you, Jesus. Thank you for inviting me today. Buenas tardes a todos. And it's a pleasure being here and an honor. And I want to thank the audience for spending the time with us, during this next 45 minutes or whatever it takes. So let's try to have some fun.
Very good. So we're going to jump right straight to it. I'm going to do a little bit of flashback. August 2020. I mean, think about that. That is 15 months ago. The world is kind of trying to figure out what a pandemic means. And everybody's trying to figure out where people are going to live, how they're going to live, how they're going to pay their bills, whether they're going to have employment or not. And in the middle of all of that, you become co-CEO of a company that is in the business of helping talent. So let's assume that our audience is a fly, just a fly in the ballroom and in the executive room of Workday. What's happening? Just give us your view of you just jump in. What was your priorities? What did that feel like?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's definitely quite interesting to go and take onto this role amidst in the middle of the pandemic, as you say, right? I guess I think whenever there is a crisis, there is an opportunity, right? And of course, we were all going through very tough moments, right? There was clearly a social crisis, a health crisis. An economic crisis, all of coming together that really started or kick off in 2020 February, and most of the audience here is very aware of what it was, and clearly really caught us off by surprise. First in APA, then in EMEA, and then later on in the US. But obviously, there were a tremendous number of decisions that companies have to make, right, at that point in time, right? So I would say, for us, we were always very, clear that we would need to be guided by our values. So meaning that employees is always being our value number one since we were founded, Jesus, and we were very clear that we need to take care of our employees, right? Obviously, customers are there, and customer focus is key to who we are, and we're obsessed about customer satisfaction. And let's take care first of our employees, and we can talk about that more later on. It makes sense. And then, what we need to do in the business we're into, how do we help our customers? First of all, let's ensure how we figure out how we're going to be, providing the services we provide completely remotely, how we're going to keep helping us to implement, on a remote basis and bring them into production on a remote basis, because to date we've done 80% remotely, but we never did kind of 100%. How we're going to keep innovating. Let's understand and let's learn where are kind of the strengths of our business models and things that we should fine tune, and let's, and none of us has gone through this pandemic and this situation before. So in the middle of, the difficult environment and context that we're all living into, is a fantastic learning experience, right? And learning opportunity. So I guess, we all try to do our best, and I guess I was privileged and lucky that as part of the management team we kind of reacted, I would say, fast, on a fast way, because you gotta think very clearly, but at the same of the time you gotta react very fast during those months, because we were all trying out things, again with our core values in mind, but trying out things of what we need to do, and we were our main stakeholders, our employees, our customers, and our communities expecting from us, to be honest, right? So there was a lot of discussion, a lot of debate. So I guess, as part of those discussions, and at that point I am 8 years or 7.5 years at the company, the board, the former sole CEO and co-founder, realizes like, maybe it gives you an opportunity to show a part of yourself that on their, the heat of the crisis, they didn't have an opportunity to see before. And this, they just thought like, why don't we gave this Spaniard fellow this opportunity to join and become Co-CEO of Workday, right? So I guess that's how things happened, and how does potentially a fly would have seen it.
Good. A few companies have co-CEOs, but not many of them. As one of those, what does it mean to be a co-CEO of a company? In this case, Workday.
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess you only see it a little bit on the private equity and investment, industry on one hand, and on the other hand, you've seen it on technology companies, right? And they come and go. Right? You could see, and we could name companies that they come and go, right? We had it at Workday at the beginning of our journey. Both co-founders, Dave Duffield and Anil, were co-CEOs for, I don't know, 5-6 years. And then Anil, who is our co-founder and current co-CEO, my partner, best partner in crime, to say some way, was the sole CEO till I took on to the co-CEO role with him, right? I think the relevant question is, what does it need to be in place for this model to work, right? And what I say is, well, first of all, is I don't know exactly what it needs to be in place. I know that it's working for us, and I can share with you where I believe are some of the criteria that that it should be in place, right? Definitely trust is a key one, obviously. If there is friendship, and that with that friendship comes respect, is quite important. I would say it works better when there is complementary skills, and in this case we have them. It works much better when there is clear side of responsibilities, and we're very clear and kind of focus on growth, and it is focused on innovation. If by innovation you understand product strategies, that plays much better to his strengths. The go-to-market side of the world plays much better to my strength, but still there is a lot of common ground in between. And how do you handle that common ground? My wife tells me, you should be handled with generosity, right? The reality is like, it works when it is low ego or no ego, right? I guess generosity is a much more elegant way of saying it. I think, the the low ego or no ego is kind of an important component of making it successful. So I don't think this is an exhaustive list, and neither nobody has told me like this has to be the criteria that needs to be in place. I've not read it anywhere because it's not a very common model. I'm just talking by experience, and by when I look and I observe where I believe it needs to be in place. If a number of these things are not in place, it's not going to work. I'm pretty sure it's not going to work.
Is one of those keys clarity of responsibilities between both co-CEOs? You said like as an umbrella, you have to have trust. If you don't have trust, probably no other thing that you put in place is going to offset for that. But assuming you have trust, how do you divide responsibilities between both CEOs?
Yeah, I think definitely. I believe it is very important. As I said, on our side, I'm responsible for growth, and Anil is responsible for innovation, right? What that means more clarity is, anything almost that touches the customers, or anything that touches the customers comes with me, right? Anything that is more from product innovation goes with Anil. And that plays to the strengths of each other, Jesus, in this case. So I think we both have a lot of respect. Like, I'm not the best. I understand technology and product. I'm not a product strategist, and I'm not the best there. I think Anil is fantastic as well when it comes to customers and understanding go to market. But I think he would appreciate that from that operational perspective. I just have had a more breadth of tenure and experience, right? So if you think it from that point of view, right, it makes the company really richer and stronger, right? The other beauty of it that that sometimes people don't appreciate, right? But I'm sure a lot of people or everyone on this call has heard about, like, the CEO is a very lonely job, right? And that loneliness, comes more from many times from the the unbalanced position of what information can you share with whom, like, meaning, like, there are 60-70% of the things you might be thinking about, either organizationally or people related or so on and so forth, that you can't comment with anyone, or you should not be commenting. Some of them, of course, you take it up with the board and the chairman of the board, but majority you can't, right? So having that other co-CEO in place, that gives you good opportunity with someone that you can comment everything, right? So that I don't know, I guess it may make the job a little bit less lonely. I can't comment because I'm not being a sole CEO myself, so I don't have that experience.
That's great. Let's dig deeper a little bit in Chano, and you and I have talked before, and we are both what I would call unlikely journeys, right? So that is still, I think you're a role model for something that is still unfortunately not common, that a Hispanic or a Latino achieves the top job or many of the executive jobs, right? We have almost 20% of the population and only 4 to 5% of those executive jobs. So understanding and helping others do that is one of the missions that high tech is very proud of. So tell us a little bit about that journey, Chano. I mean, you and I come from regions of Spain, just kind of like went through our life. We don't come from, like, history of family money or anything like that. So tell your journey, and what do you think helped that unlikely journey to the top?
Yeah. Well, I guess the good news is that you, I, and many of the attendees on these calls are changing that outlook, and things are getting better. And I'm an optimist by nature. I'm positive. So I don't know if we and many of the people on this call are the best role models, but definitely, we open minds, which I think is the most important. Like, if this did it, why this other, Latinx, which I feel very proud by my heritage, cannot do it, right? As you said, I come from the poorest region of Spain. You know it very well, Extremadura. That's where I was born. That's kind of, for people on the call, if Madrid is in the center and Portugal is a bit west, that's kind of closer, a little bit west-south, bordering to Portugal, right? I come from, I would say low middle class family. I wouldn't say poor, but low middle class family. With my father was very hardworking, and I think that is, entrepreneur, but that really, he went through the Civil War and the Second World War, so he had a lot of hunger, and he had a lot of, basically, made up his own future. And I learned a lot of good things about, the value of hardworking. They taught me good values in terms of respect and honesty, and I think that was a great ground foundation, right? Like, like keep your feet on the ground, and where you come from. But at the same time, I think he was forward looking, and though he was, we were having, economic difficulties, whenever an opportunity came, he wanted me to start exploring the world, right, and go abroad and outside, and have exposures. So I'm very grateful that, even, with his background, that he was, pretty much super open-minded, and super forward-looking, right? So, to make a long story short, I guess from there, I study physics, so I like how, physics, because it explains, simple things in life, and I like the maths and the structure and analytical capabilities of the maths, right? So I did physics, and and I really loved it, but I always knew that I wanted to be more of the business, whatever the business world would bring, right? So kind of complemented with MBA at that point in time, because I knew I had to learn a bit about economics and finance and a bit about marketing and so on and so forth. And started my career as a consultant in McKinsey for a few years, and since there onwards has been more, that we'll move on to the enterprise software, and I always been doing my career usually applications enterprise software from there onwards, right? So if you say, okay, but tell us a little bit more. I didn't go to a very prestigious university. I went to the oldest university in Europe, which is the University of Salamanca, but I wouldn't say it's any prestigious or whatever. That's what we could afford, and I was happy that again I did my physics degree there. But from there onwards, I would say is some of those values that I was grown up with, like of course I'm sure a lot of people on this call we have a higher IQ and a better EQ than myself, and those are important. But that hard working, that kind of respect, that kind of teamwork, that kind of being grateful for the opportunities you have. But I believe that your attitude will determine your altitude. Kind of a never give up guy. And I always, like if you set a target, you gotta, you can always deliver on that target. Of course, when I say you, is you and your team, but always, doing it cleanly. Like I'm not gonna be stepping over anyone to go and hit and deliver on what I have to, to be delivered, what it is expected by me. But you're gonna be expected that I'm gonna give it all. I'm gonna do my best to really, to really perform for the team, to really perform for the company. So yeah, I guess very simple things. Then of course, people say, okay, we're doing all that, and so where does this take us, Chano, right? And I guess it's a question of course, then you have to earn the opportunity, and and then you can, there's as much as you can plan in terms of what your next steps, and how do you get to your next steps. And then listen, you gotta have to be at the right place at the right time sometimes, and and that much needs to be coming. But I would say that if you do the right things, and we can discuss a lot of what that means, in most of the cases good things would happen, right? Will that mean that everyone is going to become a CEO of a large public company? Well, there's one, right? In our case there are two, right? So it's not easy. But would that mean that a lot of people will get very significant and senior roles with a heritage from Latinx and so on and so forth? Yes, I truly believe, and I'm convinced that's the case, Jesus.
Good. I'm going to ask you a pointed question that it's also personal to me. So I'll start with my answers, so then you can provide your own. But sometimes in this journey, I have found out that some things happen despite me being Hispanic, and some things happen because I am Hispanic. So our Latinx and Hispanic heritage can work to favor us or against us. Can you think of examples in your journey where being Hispanic worked against you, so you actually succeeded despite your heritage? And can you think of examples where your heritage actually helped you? And as I said, I'll understand with those. When I came to the United States, being Hispanic at the very beginning worked against me. My English was very poor, and unfortunately, most people confuse difficulty in speaking a language with lack of intelligence, right? So that if you speak bad a language, then you must not be very smart. So that worked against me, and I had to work very hard to offset those perceptions. Now, in other parts of my journey, being Hispanic and Latino, one of our superpowers is empathy. We relate to people. We have an easier time than other people to put ourselves in the shoes of others, or help, or be helpful. And I found that in some jobs, especially sales jobs, or jobs where you had to persuade, you couldn't command other people to do things, but you had to persuade them. Actually, being Hispanic and Latino has helped me do better than others. Can you think of examples of your origin, and you being Hispanic has worked, or you have succeeded despite it and because of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say it's very similar to what we just described, right? So if you think a little bit on the against, something I'm going to talk a little bit on we got to watch out sometimes, with doing our own perceptions that might not be reality. And I'm going to refer to a case that I think would resonate with the audience, right? I think similar to you, again, our command of English, and sometimes even if you speak very decent English, it's still accent and so on and so forth. When you come to where I am today in London, and earlier on, and you're in a bigger room and with executives, you don't have the same level of command and concreteness, and you don't pick the right words, and wherever, exactly as you say, there is frustration because you think you can contribute more, and you could show a better face of you, but it's just harder, right? In terms of not having that ability, that command that the rest of the audience have, right? I guess there is and sometimes there might be, and sometimes they have underappreciation, even though there might be great English speakers, but they just speak English, right? And sometimes there's underappreciation for some of us that might speak a few languages, right? But it's still, you gotta play level field, the ground field leveling with them, and it's just like, I think you just gotta cope with it, be smart, keep learning, and try to, listen and learn, and try to be at your best. Maybe you just gotta speak a bit less and try to be at your best when you have to communicate something, because you have to be earning your credibility and your respect, right? And particularly when we're talking, especially those plays against you more on the earlier years of your career, right? And or the earlier years on when you're joining a company, I would say. So I've seen a lot of that, right? And I've seen, sometimes that you feel that there are inner circles and you are not part of that inner circle, right? And it's, first of all, I'm not in favor of inner circles, because if you run a team, you run a team. But clearly, people tend to come closer to similar background context, and again, people that may have, the same level of basically thoughts and abilities that you do have. The story I would like to tell, and this is where I say we gotta watch out with sometimes with perceptions, or maybe give it a try, right? Because when you and I were preparing for this, I told you, like, let me tell you the funny story. When I joined Workday, right? I joined Workday in 2014. I was at SAP. I was doing well at SAP. Good company. I think we have better products than them, definitely. But great company and formidable competitor. And I was honestly, I was doing very well. I still have a lot of friends there. Having a stellar career and so on and so forth. And what they call, and I engage on the conversation just because there were a couple of customers that basically went from SAP to Workday, and the way they were talking about Workday, not only about their products, but about the way the company were engaging and the culture and so on and so forth, was so blooming and so shiny that I said, I gotta go and meet up these guys, right, and try to learn a little more. So anyhow, I engage and have 2 or 3 conversations, and then, as all of us, sometimes I was very busy, and I call up and I said, listen, I'm gonna kind of disengage from the process, right? And this was to, basically the person that hired me at Workday, and that was my boss for a number of years, right? I'm very nice gentleman. He said, how come? And I said, well, I have a feeling that at the end of the day, and the role I was going for was president of Europe or EMEA for Workday, right? I have a feeling that this is going to end it up with either a Brit or someone from the north, Nordics or Netherlands or so, because that's where you will end it up. They speak much better English than I do speak, and this is where it's going to end it up, right? And that was where you gotta watch out, right? And he said, no way, this is gonna be completely, I think you're doing a good job, you're well positioning. If I were you, I would continue to keep investing if you're interested, because I don't think we're gonna be biased to anyone. I gotta tell you all folks that I did not completely believe that at that point in time, but I took it as a challenge. And I said, okay, why not? And if there is someone better, great, we'll get the job, right? But I thought that, because of my heritage and for this job, and that they were not going to be, Worthy was not going to be taking the risk.
And I guess history has proven that that worked for you, not against you. So congratulations on that, and a great journey.
That's what I wanted to share this story, because we gotta be watch out with our own perception sometimes, right? Because that was my own perception, which definitely was wrong, right?
Excellent. Let me move us forward again. So flashback now, flash forward. Let's talk about the leadership role in culture. And obviously, diversity and inclusion is an element of it, but it's not the only element of it. You join Workday, and culture is one of the things that, as co-CEO, you get to directly impact. Um, Tell us, your perspective on Workday culture, what it was, what it is, and how are you moving that culture forward?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, I think for some of you that knows the company, you will know that as many of you in your companies, but we are very you have a lot of proud in our culture, right? And we feel like it's a great culture, again, on the way we are, on the way we collaborate as team, on the respect we have, on really how we live and we breathe, and our values, right? And credit definitely goes to the co-founders that took a lot of time in interviewing the 500 initial people and tried to make those a great cultural fit, and then expecting that the rest will be able to keep and really working, bringing to the company people that not only could perform and could develop here, but that would really fit fantastically well with the rest of us, right? So I think we put a lot of work on our culture, but we came to a point on 2016 or 2017 where we thought that the culture was deteriorating, right? And at that point in time, I was part of the senior management team, executive committee team, and people ask us, well, how do you know that culture is deteriorating? And it's that you got to pay attention to the details. When you go in the morning on the leave and you see that people are not smiling any longer, are a little bit more grumpy, right? Okay. When you see someone in the parking lot that is not picking up a paper, okay, and that was not happening before, you say, wow, this is not really as it used to be, right? And then you try to start to understand, okay, why is this happening? And of course, we were a growing company, and we realized that 50% of our managers were either new managers in Workday, people that come from the outside, but they're just new managers in Workday, or people that have been promoted internally and they are new managers, and that was like accounting for 52% of the total, managers that we had in the company because of the growth. So making a long story short, we decided to invest, on talking just during 3 days of culture and values in actions, where the full, senior management team were part of. And I gotta tell you, Jesus, I thought that it was gonna be a little bit fluffy, and not bringing the right content and power into it, but I was wrong. Again, I'm wrong many times. And the people and purpose organization, our HR organization, did a fantastic job on really making it really tangible and making it with real cases where we could explain what is our culture. And it is fascinating that we were just almost 2.5 days just talking about cultures and values in actions. Since then, we've been doing it for our first line managers on a yearly basis. Usually you talk around 800 people on our case, because again, people are promoted, people that join from the outside. And it's worked really well for us, right? So, that is one of the things we do. We do many of the things to try to keep fostering the culture. But yeah, I'm one of those believers that culture, clearly it's a strategy for breakfast, as it's been told. I'm one of those believers as well that your culture transpires as well, not only internally, but even when you are engaging with your stakeholders and with your customers, and that you can make it a competitive advantage, right? And I've seen that in place. So definitely super important, right? I guess what you do other than those things, you try to be a cultural ambassador, you try to be a role model, you try to hire people that work well, fit work here. And when you don't see that is happening, you try to, ensure that action is taken onto those people. We use tooling as anyone that we try to do active listening of our employees, and we show that they've been heard, and we take actions to show that they've been heard when it is the majority of them, because you need to be, feeding and nurturing the system. So it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of passionate, good work that is just making the company better. So we're privileged that we have such a great engagement from employees that are helping us out and guiding us to make this place just better every day.
Very good. Now, culture is, obviously is a good thing to do, but it's also a very, very important business lever. As I read, you have set rather aggressive business goals for Workday. And those business goals are going to require probably that you attract and retain a lot of skills at a time that seems to be a challenge for everybody. So both from the inside view that it gives you to be a software company on the talent space, and also from being a CEO of managing any company in technology these days, talk about that, the skills gap, the skills dynamics. What do you see and what do you do about it?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? Linking to what we just discussed, right? If you want to attract that talent, right? Well, of course, first, we are very proud of the people we already have here. So I think it's important to retain the talent you have, to create career paths and growth and learning opportunities for the talent you have. And you should not forget that part of the equation, because that's very important, right? And give them as well those opportunities. When you talk about kind of attracting new talent, right? I think the recipe that has worked well for us is people have felt attracted to Workday because they see it as a mix of culture and innovation, right? And of course, if you are then performing as a company, meaning that it's a growth environment, people will tend to believe, rightly so, that in a growth environment there should be more opportunities for developing and there should be more opportunities for being, right? So I'm not saying that solves it all, but that solves a big part of it in terms of how appealing are you when you are, selling yourself out there in the market to talent, in terms of being attractive, right? And you need to understand, okay, what is my DNA, what is my essence, and what is my value proposition to that talent that is out there, right? I'm kind of, summarizing what I believe is ours, right? Then of course we need to operate like, how do we expand the addressable market of the talent we can address, right? And definitely that means like locations and geographies, and maybe we need to think about having smaller offices but in more places, so we get closer to the talent. And of course I know there will be a lot of virtual talent, and we'll have a lot of virtual and remote talent these days as well. We know as well on that skills that you just mentioned, Jesus, and of course we have our skills cloud and our talent marketplace, where we try to match skills to opportunities for people internally and externally, and ensuring as well that there are gigs opportunities for people that want to keep developing and learning all the things, right? But how do you keep expanding that is you need to start looking into those underserved population, or maybe people that have not had those opportunities, because we believe that talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. How do you tap on those? How do you tap on people that, maybe didn't have the opportunity to go to college, but still they're super valuable? How do you tap on women that may have been out of, the job for 15 years because they've been raising family, which is fantastic. Thanks God, because we need the young people, well raised with good values, and, women and men should be doing so, and we need to do so, right? How do you tap in veterans and militaries and military service and people that that are really valuable? And we've been as well kind of bringing programs together where we try to tap into that talent as well, show them some of the skills that they need from technology perspective, right? They have a lot of soft skills. Imagine people that fit in your culture, skills you were talking before about empathy, about good listening, about respect, that they can learn fast. They have a lot of good soft skills that are there. It might not be, having the hard skills of becoming an IT administrator, but for God's sake, that can be trained. And maybe in some of the initial jobs, it can be trained as fast as in 6 months, right? So you find the right fit. These people as well, we have a lot of opportunity to, to show how well they can perform, and a lot of opportunity for progress. and they're going to be a great positive force, within your company. So, so that's how we think it. So in one way, what is our value proposition and how do we tap on the market that everyone is trying to tapping on the other way, from a geographical delocalization perspective and virtually, how do we do it? And then how do we expand the market onto, let's say, more, not so common, let's say, backgrounds, but that can be really accretive to what we're trying to do, right?
Very good. We have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to encourage the audience to use the chat and ask any questions that you would like Chano and I to talk about here in the last 10 minutes. There is one already out there, so I'm going to read it to you, Chano. It's related to the topic that we were just talking about. Okay. How can companies continue to nurture culture and create positive employee experience given the hybrid nature of work that the pandemic has created?
Yeah, this is a great question, and indeed, I was just discussing this topic about addressing culture in a remote environment with a number of CEOs yesterday on a Fortune event. That was taking place in DC. I was doing it virtually, but and I guess what it came out of there, and it was kind of a joint conversation, right? Clearly, there was a lot of discussion about tooling, right? And using technology tools to understand how your employees are engaged. What's their mood, to kind of to listen to them and making sure that they're being heard and that you're taking actions and so on and so forth. There was questions about, you got to be mindful, not every tool that is out there may be working for you, or that you need to feel that you need to use every single tool, right? There was this discussion about empathy and active listening skills, right? That being super important as well into, okay, it might be hybrid, but maybe there are opportunities for us to connect over the phone, not necessarily through video, and to try to have other connections and other communications. So clearly, we think on this hybrid environment when we go and we are together into the office, and sometimes the office will become the new offsite for some companies, right? But we say, when we're together into the office, we want to do it for the moments that matter, those that are for collaboration, those that are for networking, those that are for innovation, right? You don't want to go to the office to be just on Zoom calls, because you can do that from anywhere, right? But you want to go for those moments that matters, right? And it can be done, especially on the hybrid environment. I think we're proving ourselves that it can be done. But yeah, you gotta be very intentional about it, and how you create and how you shape that culture very intentionally. And when you are in that hybrid environment, again, where people are gonna be observing, to not just to me, but to all of you as leaders, how you are behaving and how you are communicating and how you are. So there is where you have the opportunity to show as well, depending on the culture you want to create, who you are as a human being, and how you had that empathy and willingness to get to know you, Jesus, as well as a human being, and understand, how can I be impactful? How can I be me as a leader? How can I be of serving to you? How can I be of help to you? Because, my role and what I do, I'm here to serve Workday. And as such, I'm here to serve all the employees of Workday, right? So I'm always very interested to, listen and learning from them, because they see a lot of things that I don't see, and they get to me, and then how can I be of help?
Yeah, and you're talking about a style of leadership that mostly started to be talked about during the pandemic. But before the pandemic, the profile of a successful executive or CEO wouldn't use the word servant leadership. It would use the words of, like, visionary, or operator, or but it's very interesting how the pandemic has, in a way, redefined in some corners what a better balanced leader is, and what they do every day, right? Is more finding out how they can be of help, as opposed to telling everybody what to do, which is the other model of leadership, right? So speaking of leadership roles, we haven't talked about one of the most important jobs, in addition to being the co-CEO, that you have in Workday. You are actually the executive sponsor of the Latinx Employee Belonging Council at Workday, which is the Hispanic group at Workday. So I'd love for you to share, one, Why does that matter to Workday? Why does the Latinx, the Hispanic group matters from a strategy perspective of the company, and then of course the subjective view as being one of those Latino, given that you're leading that group?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it matters clearly because as part of our diversity and inclusion and belonging focus, we have a number of employee belonging groups, right? One of them is the Latinx that I'm privileged to co-chair with another fantastic Latinx lady that has done a phenomenal job there, right? So the first thing is, we set some goals. I mean, we're always being focused as a company on diversity for, I would say, since we were founded. But really, we set some goals and we try to accelerate on that from goal setting to really goal getting, in the last few years. And for the Latinx, we're trying to increase the number of Latinx employees in the company by 30% in 2023, and we're trying to double the Latinx leaders by the end of 2023, right? From what we have, I think 2 years ago or 18 months ago. So we had some goals there, right? So me engaging with the Latinx, the first thing is I learn a lot. I hopefully I'm able to inspire them from time to time. They inspire me a lot, but we talk a lot about programs, actions that we're taking, to increase the number of Latinx participation in the company, both for supporting kind of the goals that I just mentioned before in terms of people joining the company, and they're doing a lot of amazing things. But secondly, as well, from helping out from a career development to Latinx. So we have different curriculums. You know, I kind of discuss with them on some of the programs and ideas and thoughts and all the things that we could be doing. I tend to support or sponsor them in case it is required, some either financial or I would say, resources support from a point of view, right? Yeah, and it's a fascinating experience. We were just having a curriculum. I was, for example, to give you an idea, I was just talking to them about executive presence, right? So we were having many different topics of the curriculum, and I was the one lecturing on, what executive presence mean and how do you get it and how do you do it. And it's in a small group of people, but it's great. So whatever thing I can do to help to see more Latinx people, if I'm able to get them a little bit more inspired, they certainly do inspire me. They inspire me, and I learn a lot because now, after I've been on that group a few times, they tell me a lot of things that I should be listening, and they're super transparent, which is great. So it gives me a little great pulse of what's working and what's not working, particularly with regarding to the Latinx community.
That's great. So as again, last call for questions before we round that up. But let me recap a little bit some notes that I've taken that I think they're very insightful. I thought all of us were interested to be a fly in the wall of the Workday executive room as you were making this decision. So hopefully people enjoy your personal journey, the unlikely personal journey. I think had some great insights. One of them being what you not to self-discriminate ourselves. You're learning of saying, hey, at some point you thought it was so unlikely you would be selected that you were almost going to take yourself out, and instead you kind of like took it as a challenge of saying, well, of course I can do that. So I thought that was very insightful. The point of the culture, there was something that I wanted you to expand on. I'll get to it in a second. And then you've talked about, diversity and the journey, hybrid work, and how do you manage culture going forward. So a couple more things as we wrap up. One is you said it in passing, but I thought it was, it caught my attention that you said something. You said sometimes what matters the most are the small things. And I think that is a very profound statement that one could make. So talk more about that. What do you mean that sometimes it is the small things that matters the most?
Yeah, sometimes it's on the small details, they're telling a lot. but we usually, just overlook them, or we see them, but maybe we don't want to raise them or pay the attention they require, because I don't know, it's just we don't consider it is important, or it is like, we have other more important things to discuss, right? Like the example I gave to you is, how do you know your culture is deteriorating, right? Because people are less happy when they come to the lift in the morning, and they're more grumpy, and they're not saying good morning, and they're not smiling that much because someone is dropping a paper on the parking lot and they're not picking it up, right? And then you think, how on earth are we going to be talking on the executive management team about these things, right? Is with all the other priorities that we have as a company, all the other things going on. But then is like you're closing the eyes to what's really going on. Or, I could go on and on, like, the kitchen is a mess and nobody's putting the plates back into the dishwasher, or, whatever, because they don't think that's their job, even if they've been using it, or that's part of what they should be doing, or things like this, right? And and when you are together, and of course, this is much easier to observe when you are together in an environment than when you are, of course, through Zoom, so you can observe things through Zoom, right? Like, there are a lot of things and a lot of dynamics that are happening on how people just interacting, and how people even care for each other. Like, if we say, okay, we have a culture of caring, but you see like people that are not really care of, or you are receiving feedback on people that are not feeling well supported or whatever. Okay, but caring is important for us, and we say we care, but we're seeing these examples that is not taking place, and it's this minor example. So do we do anything about it, or don't we do anything about it, right? What I encourage people to do, is, if they are a bit broad-based or general, or you think they are representative for them, because not everything is going to happen, but if they are representative, we need to have the discussion, because most likely otherwise what is going to happen is just going to deteriorate, right? It's going to deteriorate going forward, right? But but I guess the easier part is not to have it. The easier part is not to pay much attention, because we all think we have much more important things to do, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I have studied both some of the biggest successes in uh, corporate history and some of the biggest failure in corporate history, and whether it was because of fraud or because of whatever the root cause was at the time, it was always a very small detail that could have either prevent the failure, or it was a small detail that created a path of tremendous success. And most people call this luck, but I think luck can be translated into probabilities, and I think great leaders create an environment for probabilities of more success, and prevent situations of probabilities of bad, and a lot of it is based on paying attention to the small details. So it caught my attention because you clearly paid attention to the small details, and you have created a journey for work that otherwise it could be a very different story, right? It could
Could
be a
be a
different
very
story
different story. Could be.
if you
I
wouldn't pay
agree.
attention to those details. So in
I wouldn't
closing,
say you gotta be paranoia, and about every single detail, because there are tons of things. But I think put yourself on this conversation where we all have, right? Where something doesn't add up to you. You are in a meeting and you're hearing something like either you don't understand or worries you a little bit, but you also are thinking, and more than other things, but you also know that your agenda is packed and you're going into the next one and to the next one. And I cannot discuss this now. But I think, it's good that you reflect at the end of the day and say, yeah, but that one, even if we either maybe you had the discussion at that point in time, maybe that one I should go and ask again, right? And try to understanding a little bit better, because that could be worrisome, right? So I wouldn't say don't be paranoia, because details, there are millions of details, or thousands of details every day, and you cannot be around every single one. But I'm sure we all have had those circumstances, right? And sometimes maybe 2 years after, I say, that is what it was mentioned in that meeting that I didn't understand. I didn't pay that much attention, but look at what is going on now. Maybe you don't have the time as a leader. It's like, I'm not sure I get that. I don't have the time, but guys, can you look into it? And maybe we'll talk about it more on another day, right? But because it doesn't add up to me.
Yeah, Chano, I could stay talking to you forever. We'll probably switch to Spanish, but I want to actually wrap on that point of the point that being a leader, being a CEO of a company just doesn't equate to a license not to pay attention to the details. You have to be selective, but you have to understand the details if you want to be a great leader. So Chano can thank you enough on behalf of High Tech, on behalf of our sponsor, on behalf of myself. I love every time we have a conversation, and I knew this would be one of those times. So thank you deeply, and thank you to everybody. And with this, I think I'm going to hand it up to production, and then we're going to have Omar next. Thanks,
Thank you
Chano.
so much, Jesus. You being a fantastic interviewer. So maybe if the technology world doesn't work for you, you could move on to doing this. Great job. Okay. And thank you
I will
everyone
keep
for
my
making
day
the time.
job. I will keep my day job.
Thank you everyone for everything. Thank you, Omar.
Thank
Over
you.
to you. Bye.